All right, Chapter 8 starts on page 217, and you'll notice we have 4 objectives: chaining jQuery operations together for efficiency, ways to filter the DOM elements in a jQuery object, methods to use jQuery objects to traverse the DOM, and how to iterate through each element in the jQuery object set. All right, the chaining part is pretty short. We're going to look at that first, of course, because it is first. At the end of the chapter, they talk about using the map function versus using the each, and we'll look at that. Most of the rest of the stuff we'll go through very quickly because, again, it's just table after table. And as I mentioned to you, I've already put examples out there. I'd strongly suggest that you look at these because I can guarantee you that somehow what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that you use a certain number of these either jQuery or JavaScript or DOM methods on your next assignment. All right. So the first thing they talk about is chaining. And they give, I think, a really good example. If you look right here and you look at what's going on, okay? There's absolutely nothing wrong with what they're doing right here. But first, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, I want you to grab a div element, and that div element must have an ID of content. So find that and assign that to content div. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Then go through there and find the first, go through its children and find the first paragraph element and assign that to first P. So you've got content div and first P. Then take that first paragraph and make it bold. All right. Then find the span element that's inside of there, set that to span S, and make its color red. Okay? The idea, though, is they've done this over 5 lines. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way. But they say you can replace that with this. I don't know about you, but I like the second way a lot better. All right. It's kind of like, if you remember, and I do this on purpose, that when we're in JavaScript and we start going through those different payroll applications, and we get to where we're talking about how to give somebody overtime, and I put it into one big line of code, basically, where I say something like gross pay equals, and then we've got in parentheses max non-OT times pay rate in parentheses plus, in that, because that'll do your straight time. Then we figure out all of their overtime. So we say hours worked minus max non-OT times pay rate times overtime rate. And we could have taken that and put it into 2 or 3 different lines, but we put it into one line. In much the same way right here, that's what we're doing. And the key thing to realize is when you chain like this, it does them in order. So again, the idea is it grabs this, and the output of this becomes the input into this. Then the output of this becomes the input into this, etc. All right? And the only other thing I'll mention to you, you might or may not be surprised, you probably wouldn't, but again, if you haven't seen this before, is that normally you don't see it like this because it's too big. I mean, look at this. I keep there. Now I finally got it set up so that you can see it on one line. It's very hard to read, but you get the idea. More often than not, you'll see it like this. Don't know how they put a space in there, but they shouldn't be there. So again, these two things work exactly the same. No, it's not mandatory that you line them up by the periods, but it's kind of a convention to do it that way. All right? It's interesting. You know, every single time a new class comes through, you're different. You are different than the people who graduated last May. The first year people are different than you are. All right? And some of the people who are in there, they get caught up and they're just so goofy about different things. I got a question in class yesterday. If you remember, for example, when we set up package names, and I said make it the reverse domain notation. I got one guy in there, do I have to do that? I don't really like doing that. Can I just call it whatever the hell I want? I said, yeah, I guess so. So I'm waiting for him to create his next package that's called whatever the hell I want. All right, you'd have to know the guy who asked the question to understand why. But, I said, we're doing a bunch of those payroll projects, and I'm calling it payroll every time. No, not the people in this class. One of them was named Ogre, and all sorts of really weird stuff. All right. But again, this is basically what is the recommended way of doing things standard-wise. It's not that you have to do it like that. It's, it'll run just as fast like this as opposed to like this. And if I just throw this stuff all over the place, that'll work too. All right. But it's much easier typically to see what's going on to line it up. All right. Then they go through and they start saying, okay, now we've done some jQuery. What are we going to do with the results? And again, what I like about this chapter 2 is this is the first table. It's on the bottom of 218 and the top of 219. They show you something, then they give you an example. Then they show you something, and they give you an example. So it's kind of like, that's the syntax, here's an example. That's the syntax, here's an example, etc. So the idea is, what you're saying is, okay, now you've got some results. Now you want to start to ferret out. So you want the results when something is equal to something. All right. So notice equal 1, and since it's 0-based, that will return the second div. All right. Again, there's a filter function. Reduces the set to match a filter. Sometimes you don't want the first one or the last one. You might want some weird combination, so you can filter. You can also choose the first, or you can choose the last. All right. Or you can choose things that meet some kind of a criteria. So notice this example right here. Div.hasP reduces to only divs that have p child elements. All right. If you're going to check for equality, again, you can check for inequality. And slice. You've seen this kind of thing with slice before. All right. You've seen that in JavaScript. But notice, remove elements before index start and after index end. So that's basically what that's saying in there is what? 2 through 5. So I want items 2, 3, and 4. There's the start. So 0, 1, 2 is where I'm going to start. End when you get here. Pardon? No, I believe it. I actually think that this is right. It looks funky, but I believe that is correct. All right. All right. Again, you can traverse the DOM using jQuery. So the stuff that's here is similar in nature to the stuff that you saw at the beginning of Chapter 7 in that first chart that we went through where I said that grab the stuff from here. The HTML DOM stuff. All this stuff. That stuff is similar to what you see in here. And again, please remember, if you get confused with this stuff, I put examples of each of these out there, and I just pull all those examples from right here. And additional ones. There's just more and more. Some of these in here are a little bit obscure, like the and self, etc. Two of the ones that are in here that are important, let's see if I can show them, yeah, are the each and the map. And that's what they actually show in here. There's only one example, I believe, in the whole chapter that and it's on 224 through the end of the chapter. So the last 5 or 6 pages. And it talks about using each and it talks about using map. All right. So notice each iterates through the current set of elements and executes the specified function by passing the index each time. So in other words, sets the width of all span elements to 300 pixels in this case. All right. So each span, grab the current one, set the width to 300 pixels. All right. Then there's the map. Iterates through the current set of elements and executes a function on each of them. The map function returns a jQuery object to represent a set of results each time the map was executed, which makes it different from using each. So again, starting on the bottom of 224, 224 and 225 go over each and map in some detail. And then from 225 through 232, there's just an example project in here. So again, the each is one of the most important jQuery objects. Why? Because it's the equivalent of using a for loop. It's allowing you to iterate or traverse your way through all the elements and perform actions on them one at a time. All right? As it says, this is different from just applying the same action to all items. The each allows you to specify a function that will run for each element. So they show an example here. This iterates through all paragraph elements and sets the content to the number of the element. So if I have 7 paragraphs, this is going to say this is paragraph 0 through this is paragraph 6. Map, on the other hand, notice it says, also iterates through each element in the jQuery object set. But there's one big difference. Each will return the same jQuery object, but map will return a new jQuery object with the values returned by each iteration. All right? So typically when you use these, notice what it says. You call get to return the array version, all right, and then call join on that array to make a comma-separated string. I will tell you, I don't use map much, but I've used each. All right, to me, it's a very intuitive way of just going through an entire something. All right, so the example that's in here, it looks a little goofy, but let's just take a look at it. There's actually 2 examples that are in here. There's one right after the other. So notice when I click here, what happens? So if I click on each, what is it doing? It says, all right, give me basically a red paragraph that's 10 pixels, an orange that's 15 pixels, a yellow that's 20 pixels, etc. The map does it with divs. But notice if I keep clicking each, nothing happens. Notice what happens every time I click map. It's creating another one for me. All right? That's what map does. That's what each does not do. So the author says in here, in this example, you learn the process of using a jQuery selector to find all paragraph elements. And then it applies on each one of those paragraphs. All right? It ends up adding the color to it, and it makes the size, all right, whatever the number was in there. So it grabs, it basically parses this into 2 different things. All right? It says there's got to be a blank space in between each one. And what you find before the blank is the color. What you find after the blank is the size. And it's done with paragraphs again. That's what's done using the each. And it's done on divs. And that's what's done using the map. All right? That really is it for the chapter. So what we will do on Wednesday or Thursday is we're going to go over Chapter 9, applying JavaScript and jQuery events. Again, events are kind of their own entity into and of themselves. All right? And it's not a short chapter either. There's a lot of material in it. Then next week we'll go over Chapter 10, dynamically accessing and manipulating web pages with JavaScript and jQuery. And then Chapter 11, working with window browser and other non-web page elements. So by a week from today, at this time, we'll be done through 7, 8, 9, and 10, and I'll give you your next assignment. All right? And again, we'll go over one chapter Thursday, one chapter next Tuesday, and one chapter next Thursday. And the following week will be lab. Questions on that? I probably won't have that done. I'll try to write it this weekend. And if I do get it done early, I'll throw it out there on both the P drive and I'll throw it out there on Blackboard. All right? That's all that I had.